Good evening and welcome to Microsoft Future Ready Application Summit. We live in exciting times. The tech that we saw in the sci fi movies released a few years ago is actually becoming a way of life, thanks to the vision and creativity of some of the tech entrepreneurs in India and across the world. These innovative solutions are mainstream, and that's because tech is at the core of this innovation. And who's building these innovative solutions? It's the developers. The developers are the builders of our era. They are writing the world's code. They are at the heart of every innovative solution. And there is no question that developers will continue to play a very important role in creating value and growth across every sector in the industry to accelerate this innovation. Hence, it's very important for every digital and innovative company to build a culture that empowers developers to achieve more. And what does empowering developers to achieve more really mean? It means accelerating the developer velocity, enabling them to create more, innovate more, and solve more problems. And developer velocity is not just about speed. It is not about churning multiple lines of code, but it is about unleashing the developer velocity, turning your developers' ideas into innovative software in the most agile and productive manner. So, the multi million dollar question is, how do you foster this culture of innovation for our developers in our organization? This is what you're going to hear in the panel today. My name is Sangeeta Bavi, and I lead the digital natives business at Microsoft India. And I'm very excited to be here today to engage in a conversation with tech leaders across some of the iconic digital companies in India. I'm joined today by here by Madan Sundaram, Senior Director, Platform Engineering at Inmobi, Kaushik Mukherjee, who's the Head of Engineering at Udan, and Pavan Podila, who's the Chief Architect at Tata Digital. A very warm welcome to all of you, and thank you for joining us at Microsoft's Future Ready Application Summit. We live in a world of apps. Consumers from both India and from Bharat are interacting with technology via apps. We have an app literally for everything. And most of these apps are born in the cloud companies, and they are already cloud native. What's also interesting is that I read a report from Gartner which estimated that over 90% of all the new digital workloads would be deployed on cloud native platforms by 2025. Now, that's an interesting number. Pavan, at Tata Digital, you had the cloud DNA right from the beginning. Can you share your journey at Tata Digital in terms of this adoption?
So a lot of the early lessons which you would see as industry literature right now, we adopted very early on. Of course, there are some growing pains because we were a very big ecosystem right in the beginning. And although we were a small company ourselves, Tata Digital is just a small subsidiary of Tata Sons. But we had a lot of brands which were still using older technologies and technologies which are not considered mainframe in some cases and so on. So the integration effort was much higher. But I think the cloud kind of helped in even modernizing some of our brands and some of our integration ecosystems in that process. So I think it's been quite a journey so far. I wouldn't say we are far ahead in terms of setting a new standard for the industry, but we're definitely getting there.
Thanks, Pavan. Inmobi, Udan, Tata Digital are names that are synonymous with scale, with applications across e-commerce, mobile advertisement, service aggregation. All of you are literally redefining the way platforms can scale with the power of cloud native while catering to literally thousands and thousands and thousands of users a day. But with massive scale also come the challenges of security, and that's an aspect which cannot be compromised, especially in today's times. So Kaushik, how have you achieved this scale without compromising on security?
As far as security is concerned, my firm belief is that you need to enable security by design. It cannot be an afterthought. In the sense that you need to always plan ahead. You talked about multiple apps, so how do you sort of bring in? How do you test app security? Is there a process which is already in place? Do you conduct various kinds of threat assessments right from the conceptualization phase, right? Various kinds of input validations. Are there principles that you enforce in terms of privileges? How does your data flow? As in, do you embrace encryption in design, or is that more in specific places, right? So aspects of these need to be inculcated in the way you do things from an implementation standpoint, and thus security is largely a, a design choice that you enforce at implementation versus it being an afterthought, because as you scale, then you're really playing catch up if you haven't necessarily designed it to ensure that your applications are actually secure.
In fact, Kaushik, a follow-up question on that. When you mentioned that all of this has to be a very deliberate and informed decision right from the beginning. One question that often comes up, with scale is prioritizing your optimization, ops, management. This is a challenge that a lot of startups face today, and we get we get these questions very often from startups in terms of how do we balance between control and productivity. What it means is that, do we leverage IaaS that gives teams complete control in terms of cloud computing, or leverage some of the PaaS and managed services so that developers time and bandwidth is freed up to do and innovate more things, right? Or is it possible to basically strike a balance between these two worlds? Now, what's interesting, Kaushik, is I remember Udan had a very clear vision on this strategy. When you became a unicorn, I think you had a very lean team of about 17 engineers, because right from the beginning, Udan had decided that engineers will not focus on infrastructure. You will let Microsoft take care of that. Use some of the PaaS services and free up your engineers' bandwidth to go and build the core platform of Udan. So, can you tell us a little more about the control between the balance between control and productivity, and how has Udan been able to strike this balance?
Sure. So, see, from a philosophy standpoint, Sangeeta, the philosophy continues to remain the same, which is we would want to invest our efforts on anything that leads us to solve for a particular business problem. Now, and in the process, if it leads to us creating competitive advantage, we would go ahead and invest in it. However, if there are solutions that are already available out there, which is more commoditized, there is absolutely no point an organization then trying to reinvent the wheel, right? So, as you scale, as you figure out if there are opportunities or pockets where you invest, that leads you, because see, at the end of the day, at at heart, Udan is a tech company. So that, I mean, whatever scale we are leveraging is through the power of technology that Udan has. What that also essentially means is it creates these pockets of opportunities where you would at the end of the day also invest in technology yourself, maybe creating various kinds of developer tools, right? But that said, anything that is commoditized that can be reused, towards furthering your business would, at Udan, we continue to sort of stick to that particular philosophy. So if there are things which are being available from the Microsoft stable that allows us to solve problems, business problems in hand, we will continue to do that. Right? So
Madan, the same question to you. InMobi has been one of the early adopters of containerization as a concept. Would love to hear your thoughts in terms of how has your transition to Azure Cloud help you achieve this balance between control and productivity for your developers and engineering teams?
Yeah, first of all, Sangeeta, thank you so much for the opportunity. Loving the great interaction with the great panelists here. So, answering your question, yes, InMobi was an early adopter, right? As Kaushik was mentioning, if the technology is available and is helping us in many ways, InMobi recognized, you don't have to spend lot of time maintaining AKS or Kubernetes yourself, right? That is not where our value lies. So it becomes an easier decision when a team like Microsoft, a company like Microsoft backs these services. It becomes an easy choice for us. Say we trust that all the platform and its nitty-gritties and nuances are taken care of. We focus on value delivery to our end users, right? So that is always our focus. And the balance comes automatically, right? So the decision to focus on value to your end customers actually trumps all the effort that you want to put in, fine tuning. Of course, you do fine tune. You now rely on a bigger team. You ask for, hey, I have this new need that is coming up. Can you help me there? And you get much better response from a team that is spending 24/7 developing that technology. So that is how InMobi has been able to leverage, focus on the value delivery rather than just uh, having our own ops team trying to figure out. Although we know we have the ability, we chose to partner with Microsoft to take it to the next level. Yeah.
Thank you, Madan. Let's switch gears. I spoke a little bit about developer velocity, creating a culture of, where you can actually nurture developers and empower them to do more. And increasing developer velocity, developer productivity is critical to driving business performance. It's also about creating the right environment and literally removing the points of frictions for developers to innovate. Again, an interesting data point from McKinsey, which says that organizations that foster developer velocity grow roughly about 4 to 5 times faster than their peers. And what's more interesting is that they see a 50% or more a higher rate of innovation in the company. Now, all of us know that software development is a constantly evolving craft, and developer tools need to reflect those changes in the development workflows. And the developers' responsibilities are not going down, right? They need to continue to uh, enhance their tech intensity, to embrace new technologies. So what's important is for us as tech leaders to automate some of the core development processes like testing, CI/CD, so that developers free up their bandwidth and they can focus on really doing what matters to them. And DevOps is the union. DevOps is not a new concept. It's a union of people, processes, and technology to deliver continuous value to users and to developers. And when this is adopted as a culture, DevOps practices enable both developers and organizations to move from idea to code to cloud extremely seamlessly. Madan and Pavan, you have some great tech talent in your organizations. What are some of the practices that you are driving to empower developers and to also accelerate the developer velocity for your teams?
You want to go, Madan, or should I go ahead first?
Go ahead, Pawan.
Yeah. So this is a very interesting topic, developer velocity, right? And there is, I think you covered probably 60-70% of what it takes and the ingredients of developer velocity, which is getting the cloud out of the way, and which is what we get with Azure. But there's also a process involved in pushing code to the cloud, which is all the quality gating you have to do in between. Now, I think there are certain areas which is the cultural aspect, which I think requires a little more attention in any company, right? So hiring great people, hiring people with a lot of attitude towards building great things and having the passion to do it is actually a very important hiring step itself, so that you get the right flow of people in. And I think that infusion of talent will obviously make a big difference to the community of developers we have in the organization. I think the other thing is also recognizing that certain programming languages have a different level of expressivity, which helps in thinking and translating problems into working code, right? I mean, if I take the modern languages like Kotlin or Rust or Go, right? I mean, these are languages suited for the modern day development of creating services and deploying them to the cloud. And they're very cloud friendly also in terms of doing async programming and working within reactive code and so on. So I think it's a very important choices you need to make in terms of what tools, languages, frameworks you choose to build your code, and making it a standard across the organization, so that we're not picking and choosing these things for every new microservice you create, right? So you create some standards across the organization and make it consistent, because then the tooling will be built entirely around that. So you have a very strong wide base of consistent and predictable tooling, and anybody can just pick up and make a request for it, provision the appropriate services, resources on the cloud, and then push your code. And I think that's one aspect of it. The other is, of course, while you're developing and exploring an idea, you need a sandbox for yourself, right? So I mean, you don't want to inherit an entire network infrastructure of the cloud, which is obviously thousands of services deployed, right? So how do you create a sandbox for yourself so that the ecosystem that you're working with is captured nicely into some kind of a sandbox, so that you can work with it, test your ideas, deploy it, work with various kinds of performance measures, and see if the idea actually has value. And then, if you can present it in a forum where you work with against real services and you can show the merit for that idea, then obviously, you can take it to a much wider team and a set of developers to productionize it, right? So that's one aspect, again, in terms of, creating a sandbox for developers. And then overall, I think we need some kind of a self-service portals, I think, which is what Azure gives you right out of the box, right? It's a multi-tenant portal that you get for any organization to build your subscriptions, resource groups, et cetera, et cetera. We need a similar kind of a thing in our organization, so that people, when they want to try out new things, they don't have to rely on an infra team and go through a series of approvals and all kinds of long-running bureaucratic process to get things done. And that unnecessarily adds friction. It probably also makes the whole process a little less friendly, and probably you lose the steam to actually try out new things, right? Because there's so much of friction involved in translating something that you have in your mind to getting it deployed and tested on your infrastructure. So I think if you remove the friction points and make it as easy as possible, convenient to try out things, so that you don't have to depend on a lot of people and infrastructure for every little thing you do, I think that adds to the productivity.
Great, thanks. Madan, how about you?
Yeah, Pavan actually covered most of the technical aspects. I'll touch upon the cultural aspects, right? How InMobi is enabling. About a year ago, we went to the roots of what enables developer productivity within our teams, and then we baked in continuous deployment as one of our operating principles. What this gives us is, as Kaushik was also mentioning, security being part of the design, we think continuous deployment as part of our design, right? So we encourage our developers to think in a very modular fashion, like how their piece of code will manifest in production. So for that, tooling is very, very important, right? So though we had already solved for CI/CD back in the days, we were re-looking at how can we make it more seamless, like Pawan was mentioning, self-service portals, not being dependent on one central team. How can you be agile and nimble, try out things on your own clusters, things like that. So culture is combination of many things, right? First, you start with the philosophy of why you want to do what you want to do, and then you enable your people. You hire people and then set them loose, right? That's how we have always operated, and that's how we are trying to tackle this problem going forward.
Great, thanks, Madan. So one question to all of you in terms of just the developer audience, right? Developers are one of the most sort of difficult audiences to convince when you have to change the culture to drive increased developer velocity. What are some of the challenges that you see in driving this culture of increasing developer velocity, standardizing some of the processes? Any top of mind challenges that you've come across? Kaushik, you want to go first?
Sure. Change is hard. You're used to working a certain way, and if you're asked to change that way of working, regardless of whether or not it's good for you, it's hard. But what I've noticed, and this is true at Udan, and with most things that we do, we open engineers to the problems, to real problems, right? And then we ask them to figure out, can a thing which is being done today be done any better? Um, are there things that we could do that reduces your anxiety when you're actually trying to push, let's say, a piece of code to production? Does it give you better confidence? Now, when you lay out the outcomes, and then you ask an engineer to figure out how do we get there, what ends up happening is you get a lot more of acceptance. And once that happens, and once you see a few success stories, it's very important to talk about the success stories, even though it's inside the organization. Like at Udan, we have a weekly newsletter on SDLC where we talk about what are some of the highlights that a clutch of engineers would have achieved in the last week that help them to get better at productivity or reduce their anxiety or make their engineering experience better. That creates a nice flywheel, and that's how you end up bringing in some of the adaptations in latest technology that happens outside. You essentially end up creating that culture, right? And then that becomes infectious. That's what works, in my opinion.
Thanks, Kaushik. Pawan?
Yeah, so I think I'll definitely, agree with Kaushik on that one. The more socializing you do about, early wins, especially for younger developers, right, who are new to probably these practices, I think it makes a big difference and advocating those things across the board. The other thing I would add is, open source as a culture, right? I mean, when you're building software, obviously you're building for yourself, and you want to grow your business and create some magic sauce for yourself as part of your technology foundation. But there are always elements in which you can outsource and open source, not outsource, but open source, so that this becomes a technology stamp or a signature for the company, right? So we ourselves are engaging into an open source arm at our digital, where we are advocating these ideas, inner source, and fostering those things and attracting a community of people who think like open source developers, right? And in open source is a community. It's a community feeling, right? You feel proud that you have built something of value and the company is using it, and you have a group of people whom you can show through pictures and tech connects and internal meetups and so on. People feel more connected and they feel like doing the right thing for the product and the process, so that nothing bad ever happens, right? Obviously there will be bugs, there will be issues, but the feeling of building something great, I think can be fostered with an open source culture, and I think I would definitely advocate that for organizations across the world.
Great. Thanks, Pawan. Madan?
Yeah, I mean, great points shared by Kaushik and Pawan, right? So from my point of view, see, developers are in or an opinionated bunch, right? So our success depends on the opinions that we carry, right? That can also come in the way of adopting new technologies faster, right? You just cannot uh, top-down approach of just pushing some technology on people may work for a short time, but it's not for a long time. We want an inclusive culture where we want to hear the different experiences and different opinions from people coming from different walks of life, right? So some technology that works for you may not work for others. So right, and creating that sense of pride is very, very important, in my opinion, right? So you are part of a bigger community, as Pawan was suggesting, that open source gives us a great sense of belonging, right? And also being a part of the uh, community within your organizations. There are so many other teams which go through the same things that you do, face the same things that your team is facing. So collaborating with them, trying to break bread with them every day, and fighting the good fights, as we say, right? So, and adoption again by design shouldn't be easy, in my opinion, right? So the hard conversations that we have, the realities that makes us better people at the end. So there is a sweet spot where you don't want to uh, go to consensus for everything, but as a group we should hear out what are the other opinions, so that people get the conviction that our opinions are heard, and then we make a decision, right? That's much more better way to make a decision, and that worked for us very well in technology adoption.
Great. So, communities celebrating best practices, sharing best practices, and open source are some of the ways to foster this culture. In fact, at Microsoft, we are big proponents of open source as well, contributing across operating system, programming languages, data and AI. In fact, even across the cloud native development, making writing of the microservices using Kubernetes easier with projects like Dapper, Helm, Keda. Microsoft is a contributor. So great to hear that. From DevOps, let's switch over to DevSecOps, right? Some interesting data points to our audience. Roughly about 58% of security and development teams do not collaborate. Security is getting pushed right at the end of application development and management cycles. And the result of this is roughly about 75% of the bugs do not get found until production cycle, which becomes very expensive. It's estimated roughly about it becomes 60 times more expensive to fix a security bug during production than during development time. And one of the outcomes and impacts of this is that it typically takes more than 200 days for an organization to uncover a security vulnerability, which does not just impact revenue and cost, but it also impacts the brand. Kaushik, what is your guidance to every startup on secure development, and especially how to basically incorporate the practice of DevSecOps?
Sure. I just want to add to the previous point just a minute. You're talking about Microsoft. We are largely on SQL Server, and we came up with this tool called a Snorkel. What that does is it basically creates a lot of insights into if an engineer is writing bad queries, it sort of warns you and ends up giving recommendations, etc. We realized a lot of value of that internally, and then we open sourced it. I'm just calling that out because there was a lot of good collaboration that we had with the Microsoft teams on building this tool out. So I'm just validating what you called out, Sangeeta, on that. Now coming to the point on security, I think, like I said, and I think you also called it out, that the cost to discovering these issues later on is disproportionately higher. And God forbid, if it's a major security vulnerability that is leaked through, then you're really in for a very rude shock, to put it mildly. So like I said, that it's important to not only bake in the way you go about developing things in design from an implementation standpoint, but also in production. What you need to do is you need to frequently keep checking for vulnerabilities. There are new ways through which systems could get compromised. So you end up doing various kinds of tests at a periodic basis, even on production, to figure out if there have been any regressions which have necessarily not been caught during your engineering cycle. So it's a two-pronged approach. You try to avoid it, but then there would always be something that bubbles up. So you want to continue to be, getting those checks done over time. So from a process standpoint, that's what I would recommend. Apart from obviously the first principles in security during development that you don't compromise.
Absolutely. No, thanks for that, Kaushik. In fact, along with GitHub, we also have some of the Azure services like Azure Monitor to understand, your runtime behavior of apps and infrastructure. You have Azure Security Center, which is home for security information and status. So a combination of Azure and GitHub can actually provide the building blocks to develop and scale your DevSecOps practices in your organization. So as we wrap up our conversation today, I would like to go around the table, one line of advice to some of the upcoming startups as they are embarking on their journey of scale, right? What are the things that they need to, what are the three things that come top of mind for all of you, the guidance that you can give to the upcoming startups? Again, in no particular order, Madan, would love to hear your top three advice points to the audience.
Okay. All right. Top three, as it comes to my mind, people are your assets. Invest in people from early on. They don't take a shortcut there. right? So second is design is the key. Invest, they say, right? So measure twice and cut once. So in that way, invest in design. Third is again, use pass as much as possible wherever you can, right? So your unique value proposition will come when the day comes. You will be prepared to build on your own. So that's my three advice.
Thanks, Madan. Pawan?
Yeah, I think I'll definitely echo what Madan just said. So people are your biggest assets. Hire the right talent, and they'll do the rest of the stuff for you, provided you give the guardrails, which is the process to deliver the right product. Right. So it's people, process, product, as the old mantra goes. I think besides that, I think these days, and I again keep advocating for open source. I think open source is a technology that you can use to find people and also retain people, right? Because even if the people is not the person is not working with you, as long as they're working on the product, which is the open source framework, library, whatever, they're continuing to add value to your organization, right? And if you build a great open source project, so look at the way number of CNCF projects that are happening, right? They're happening across organizations, and people move between organizations, but the product continues to mature. So I think as a startup, you should invest in mature tools, mature people who have the right mindset for bringing the right talent, and thinking more holistically in terms of what you're building. Right? You may build your business, but business builds on a lot of technology blocks, right? So if you can get the right technology blocks, create a foundation for other companies as well to build on the same technology blocks. I think you would have created an ecosystem where you're not creating something very ad hoc, something unique for yourself, right? So you're building an entire community of technology tools for everyone.
Thanks, Pawan. And Kaushik, to you last.
Sure. I think Madan and Pavan covered it all, but I'll just add a few things. I think that, and I've increasingly started believing this over time, that you don't necessarily need to incur tech debt for speed. You can achieve stability and speed both, as long as you're having the right guardrails in place. I think if regardless of you being a budding startup or a mature startup, wherever you are in that spectrum, you can achieve both. There are technology has advanced significantly. There are many offerings that come out of the box. Try and leverage to the extent that you can. More importantly, to the startups and to even matured companies, expose your engineers to real problems. The more you expose them to real problems, the better your solutions are going to be. Just keep that in mind. And yes, don't over engineer, of course. Horses for courses. Ensure that you are solving for the problem at hand. Don't overthink.
Thank you so much, everyone. I'm just going to wrap up. Take the four key takeaways for me from this conversation has been use open source to not just find but also to retain your people. Very important. Second one was use pass as much as possible. Stability and speed can be achieved provided you have the right guardrails, pick the right tech. And last but not the least, invest in people, invest in skilling the tech talent that you have in your organization. Startups are the accelerators of changing India's persona from a services nation to a product nation, and play a key role in innovating the Indian economy. So to sustain and accelerate this pace of innovation, we need to foster increased developer velocity across our organization. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.